Hello everyone, I'd like to do a tour of my garden. It's almost the end of July and I just like to show you how things are blooming and coming along in the garden. So we're looking at my front door. The cat planter is almost completely covered. You can see the cat right there with the Supertunia Vista, and I just love that bright pop of pink right there. To the left of the cat planter, we had a volunteer pumpkin vine. We had a jack-o'-lantern sitting here last fall, and I guess I didn't get all the seeds cleaned up, so we have a volunteer pumpkin, and we just decided to go ahead and let it grow there. So that's kind of fun. And then the front of the house here is the flower bed that we made over. So it's really looking nice. Let me do a sideways view here. So there's a view of the sidewalk, and we have wild berry heuchera. The bobo hydrangeas are blooming beautifully, and they're starting to get a hint of pink that they will turn in the fall right there. So they'll fade to a really pretty pink. And then this is the Thunbergia vine, and it's growing vigorously. I mean, it is just trailing. You can see tendrils coming clear out there. It's a very vigorous grower, but the problem is I don't think it gets enough sun because this is mostly shaded. It only gets direct sunlight late in the afternoon. So as you can see, there's no pink blooms. So moving in front of the Thunbergia, there are 3 hellebores that are the first to bloom in the spring. Another bobo hydrangea in the back, more of wild berry and primo wild rose heuchera. They're all kind of, you can see there the difference in coloration of the 2 heucheras. I went back to the same garden center, but they didn't have the same heuchera the second year. So I think they blend pretty well together, and I like the color of both. Now, this next bobo hydrangea, I don't know why it didn't bloom. There are no blooms on it whatsoever, but the tag is still on it, and it says it's a bobo hydrangea, so we'll see what it does next year. There's the other Thunbergia growing up over the trellis, and like I said, a very vigorous grower, but there's no blooms. I don't think it gets enough sun. So I don't think this will be something that I repeat next year. And then there's the final bobo hydrangea blooming so pretty. I'm going to back up and give you a view of the whole front. Okay, so this is what the front of my house looks like with the makeover that we did this spring. So moving on down the sidewalk, I call this the sidewalk to nowhere because it just kind of ends. Someday I'd like a wraparound porch around the front, but that's in the future. So let's talk about our pine tree over here. So I've got a couple snow on the mountain vines. This cherub was an old home and garden purchase when my neighbor sold home and garden. I used to keep Hershey Kisses in the top of it, but now I'm using it as a planter. And then over here I have a mixture of coleus, and most of these were clearance plants. I got a 4-pack for $1, so I'm kind of babying these along to see how they do. I'm on the other side of the pine tree now. There's the cherub that I turned into a planter. Here's my rose bench. It has a rose motif across the top, and I situated it so that, here, let me sit down. I can see the children as they're climbing in the tree, and then I can also see over towards the swing and the trampoline. I'm standing on my front stoop right now, and this is just our front yard that faces the road. There's a black lace elderberry there by itself. I'd eventually like to have flower beds along the border to the bank, and then on down to the road, but this is what it looks like right now. The other thing is my husband's really into trains, and this is one of the fairly flat spots on our property. I think it'd be really cool to have a small adult train that we could ride around here, put a train track in and ride around this yard. So that's kind of a dream on the back burner. So let's go on over here. We put up a new swing this year. The old one was losing rungs off the back, and there's a video up about how we put up the swing. It's definitely a two-person swing, but if you follow the chains up, it fits perfectly into the branch of the catalpa tree. The other swing was too wide and the chains were like at a V. And so here's the trampoline, and I haven't worked on a path around it yet, but I'd like to put in a path around the trampoline this way. And over here is, I'm really, really proud of this catalpa tree. I really love it. It's so big. The impatiens on this side of the catalpa right here, they're not blooming as much. I had to wait until the tulips turned brown and the foliage started to die back, so that the tulips could store their energy for next year's growth. And then I planted these impatiens. And so over here, this has been a little bit of a learning curve here. I planted this side for shade, because when you look up, there's the catalpa mixed in with that cedar, and I think that's some kind of a lilac right there. But yeah, so I planted white impatiens because I thought it would look really good with the hosta and just be kind of restful for the eye, since we have so much of the pink impatiens going on. I have that little trellis there. But this behind here, in the spring, this was getting a lot of sun. And so I planted some Supertunia white, forget the name. But they're not doing so good. As the trees branched out, it's too shady. So I think next year I will just stick with the white impatiens the whole way around, because they're doing great on this side. So I think we'll do that on this side as well. Right next to that flower bed, I have this really, really old lilac. Excuse my rock pile. I'm not quite sure what I want to do with the rocks, but I do like to garden with them, so they're just kind of there for now. My grandsons and my children have all played inside this lilac, and I think I played in there when I was little as well. It's just a really fun clubhouse for them in the middle. And then this is the flower bed I've been working on and off throughout the summer. This flower bed starts off with a Godzilla fern right there, and I really like it because it has red in the stem and for the foliage. And then there are 3 Jack Frost Brunnera. There's 3 white vinca. In the back there is a purple fountain grass. Then there's 3 speedwells. I like the look of the purple spikes. The yellow grass there was called a sedge. And then this is Picasso in purple, and they are not doing so good. They do better for me in containers versus directly in the ground. And behind them is a pepper plant, an ornamental pepper, and it's not doing so good either. This is a salvia called Pink Dreams. It's bloomed out now, but it was really pretty when it was blooming. There is a butterfly bush. I still have a little bit of blooms left on it. And another Pink Dreams salvia. And then somebody put the rock there, which I kind of like, so I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm still working on clearing the other side of the flower bed down towards the road. It's just been a long process, but here we have another purple fountain grass, daylily, and I'm looking at placing these 2 heuchera. I really like the color. They're like red and gold foliage. I'm placing these 2 heuchera on either side of the stepping stones for the clothesline, because up in the tree there's a hook. Then we just have a purple petunia, some alyssum, another daylily, and this was, I think, Veronica. They were a clearance plant. They're bloomed out, but they still have green down at the base. So hopefully they will come back next year. And in front of the Veronica is Supertunia Vista Bubblegum, and it's just doing great in this spot. So if you back up, I really love the lines of this flower bed, and I can't wait to see it get filled in even more next year with more perennials. And then I shall also be working on this left side down to the road. So this little flower bed has some daylilies and some pink geranium, and it's at the corner of our property. And then we have my mailbox with Supertunia Vista Bubblegum plant. Standing beside my mailbox, back there is where I dump the weeds and dirt when I am clearing out my garden. So I've talked about that, but let's go take a look. So this is the spot where I dump all of the dead plants, the grass, the weeds. But first off, notice this spot. I actually had to go out and buy a strong weed spray because this vine that you see making that loop around the tree, that right there, that's poison ivy. And it was sticking out into this walkway that I go back into this area. And I got a very bad case of poison ivy all up my arms because of that spot. So I sprayed it with my salt and vinegar and Dawn dish soap. Weed spray didn't do a thing. So I went out and bought a weed spray, but it killed all the grass and everything around it. And maybe it's affecting the tree a little bit too, but I don't care because that's a walnut. And you know how I feel about walnut trees. So it can go ahead and die. All right, so let's go back in here. So there's this little path. And then you can see, I think that was maybe the Christmas tree. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, so this is where I dump all the grass and dirt and tree limbs, the ones that we don't burn anyways. So I just come back here. So it's nice to have a spot on the farm that is out of sight, out of mind. Nobody can see it. And this can all just decompose into a big compost. And eventually it'll be nice dirt that I could use somewhere on the farm eventually. So yeah, this is my garden dump. Okay, leaving my garden dump area, you can see the mailbox out there in the distance, but this tree right here is an oak tree. And we used to have a gorgeous giant oak tree that had been struck by lightning probably one too many times and fell over several years ago. So this oak tree, next spring, I think I'd like to clear out underneath of it. There's really not too much back there, except, look there, another walnut. Just clear that out and mow around it so that this tree can grow nice and straight and healthy. Guess what kind of tree that is right there? Yeah, walnut. And this one right here? Walnut. See that walnut right there? Those will be all over my yard and growing a million new walnut trees. Walnuts are a weed tree. Can't stand them. Well, here's our path down to the other part of the yard, and look what's growing here. A brand new walnut. And then another one right in the middle of the path. Walnut. And over here, a smaller one. Walnut. Can't stand them. Alright, so the path here has family names on it. My husband made each of the stepping stones with our names on it. So let's just go in here. And I'm trying to turn this into a secret garden. So I'll just stop right here. If I turn to my right, we have a bench. Let me come on around so you can see the front of it. For the kids to sit and just play and do whatever. We got a couple of bigger rocks from my great uncles, figuring they can jump, or we'll arrange them somehow. And then the path goes on down to our lower yard. And if I turn to the left, there's an opening where I'd like to put a path with more stepping stones as my other children get married and have children, so we can have more of these stepping stone paths up that way. All right, so let's go down into this lower yard. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is the redbud tree. We had a very bad microburst storm come through, and we lost power for over 24 hours, and a big limb cracked and broke off where this is leaning. So I cleaned that up yesterday. I sawed it off, and there it is. It's still too green to burn, so it's just got to sit there for a little bit. We burned a whole bunch of limbs that have fallen down. If you had seen my Facebook page, I had piled all the limbs up by the trampoline that had fallen, and we had burned all of those. These are more limbs that have come down. Oh, and I forgot to show you the one in the catalpa by the road. I'll run back up there and show you. Okay, so I came quickly back up to the catalpa tree at the end of the yard with the hook in it for the clothesline. But what you're looking at is a dead branch that is going to fall on someone and hurt them. But it goes all the way up to there is where it broke off in the storm. And there's no way to get to that. There just isn't. So that whole thing right there is dead and just waiting to fall on someone. So you can see just how high that is, way up there, for us to be able to cut it. So we just kind of have to wait for the next storm to bring that down and hope no one gets hurt. So I thought in this garden tour I'd also include a tour of the treehouse. So this is a new addition to the treehouse. We had gone to a flea market and found this bell. So we put that down here for the children. All right, so to start the treehouse tour, there's a really nice sized white rock at the bottom. We have very steep steps up to the treehouse with the handrail. We're going to use that slide in another project. So let's go up into the treehouse. Okay. Once you get up in the treehouse, there are a couple options to get down. We do have the slide. There's a little rail so that they can hold on to go down the slide. They can go back down the stairs, which are very steep, but I tell everybody to go up and down the stairs facing the stairs, just for safety. There's a swing, and there is a rope ladder attached to this limb where they can get out. Or if you're very daring, like my grandsons, they actually step in here and they jump down to the trampoline. I'm not going to do that. All right, so I moved my bistro set up here. We just moved the house around to a different spot, but my neighbor, the neighbor children, they said, there's no place to have a tea party up here. We need a table and chairs. So there we go. I brought a table and chairs up here. It's also nice for me to have something to sit on. And then there is a tree house up here. It was a kit from Sam's Club, and I figure this is about 11 or 12 years old. It's holding up pretty well. And if we take a look inside, there's the stove, and my husband took extra wood that came with it and he built shelves. Over on this side there is the kitchen sink, and here in this basket is where I've put all the food for the kids. So we have some dishes, but check this out. There is all kinds of food in there that they can enjoy. Both sides are really, this whole thing is full of food so that they can play and use their imagination. So this is the interior of the little tree house, and they have a view out there of the barn. Maybe now that the flash is on, there's a better look at the shelves. Yeah. Okay, so then you come over to the rail. Then there's a view of the burning pile and the part of that red bud that's drying so I can burn it. And there's our old horse trailer and our barn. So they're up high, so they have a really nice view. So here's a view of the treehouse from my house. We have the baby swing that's like an airplane right there. Somebody's parked their bike there. Here's the slide to get out of the tree. We have the trampoline escape. You see, they were jumping out of the tree, and I thought it might be a little bit safer to have the trampoline there to soften their jump. And then right here is the rope ladder, which they use to get up into the treehouse. And then there's this other swing, the donut swing. So that's the treehouse right there, treehouse. Okay, so we're back to the sun porch of my house. This is an area that I want to do a makeover. This wood of the retaining wall is mostly rotted out, and I want to take that out and put in some landscape brick. But let's talk about the plants. This little planter has Super Bell's Strawberry Punch, and they're a pink, but a little bit on the salmon corally pink side, and they're just really cute with that planter. Now my husband made this. He was experimenting with cement, so he made me a wagon wheel design. And that's an old fruit press, antique. And then this was my stepping stone, but I don't want to use it as a stepping stone. It says Mom's Garden. And these trio of planters on the corner are just doing great. It's Supertunia Fuchsia, Silverberry, and Vista Bubblegum. And if you can't tell, I like pink, so these are just about my favorite on the farm. I love these. And then of course there's the rain chain on the edge of the house. And so talking to my neighbor, we ended up putting the bench here at the corner of the house because there wasn't really any seating other than sitting on the steps there. And we can, here, let me sit down. See, you have a good view of the children as they're playing in the treehouse. So I took her suggestion. It just made sense to have the bench here. I had placed the bench underneath that pine tree, but the problem was this limb blocks your view of the children, and it seemed like we were a little bit farther away. So I kind of like having the bench here so we have more seating to keep an eye on the children. Okay, next up is some more pink impatiens. You hear the cicadas in the background. Now, here are the hayrack planters. I love them, but the pansies that were in there are on their way out. And at this point, I'm just going to wait until mums come out and maybe do more of a fall arrangement in these hayrack planters because I didn't get them switched out. The pansies were doing so good in May and early June that I didn't want to switch them out, but they're just, the heat now is just too much for them. So I think I'm just going to wait and dress up these hayracks for fall. But I do love them. Okay, now this sidewalk is original to the house. At least it was here when I was a little girl. This house and this farm, it belonged to my grandparents, and so this sidewalk was original. And I remembered it from being a child, but when my husband and I bought the house, it was completely grown over. It was just grass. And I told my husband, you know, there used to be a sidewalk under here. And so we started digging, and we actually unearthed this sidewalk. And then I redid it. I put landscape fabric underneath of it, and we used a mixture of sand and mortar in the cracks. So yeah, pretty neat, some history there. All right, this is the north-facing flower bed, It has feverfew. The lighter green here is feverfew, an herb. This darker green here in the front is money plant. A money plant bloom looks like coins. And so this is deutzia, gets little white blooms in the spring. And my brother-in-law gave me this trellis. I'm not sure where to put it, but it might be something I put in a sunny spot and try that Thunbergia on next year, because the shorter trellises in the front, they've just overwhelmed those. There's a bleeding heart, and this really light green one is called Sun King. And then here's my watering station with my hose reel and the other hose. And for fertilizing this year, I'm trying, and I really like this attachment on my hose and fertilizer into the hopper there, and it just automatically disperses. So that's been a godsend instead of having to mix individual milk jugs or mixing it up in the watering can. This has been so much nicer to use this to fertilize the flowers.